welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We are so happy that you are here with us. I would like to say hello and welcome to my co-host, or should I just say hello to my co-host? We are both
Hello.
happy. Yes, we are both happy to be here with you, Dr. Ricardo White, and myself. We're just thrilled to be able to do this with you again today. Sorry, we're jumping on here a little bit late, but we are here and we are just thankful that you are here. Please put in the chat where you are watching from. We love to see, it is always a blessing to see where everyone is viewing from. Want to give a shout out to our mental health producer, Amara Sowell. It was her birthday yesterday. So told her happy birthday yesterday. Now I'm saying happy birthday here on Mental Health Mondays because
Happy belated.
yes, happy belated birthday. I know that it was a great one with you and Terry. You guys spoil each other, so that's a blessing. That's truly what a marriage should be. So we see, welcome Courtney from Georgia and Gianna from Grace, Idaho. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We are so happy to see all of you. And as Dr. Ricardo White said last week, we love our regular viewers, and then we also like our newcomers. So I'd like to know if anyone's on tonight that or this evening that this is your first time checking Mental Health Mondays out, please put a 1 in the chat.
Shout out to Clint, our regular from Longview, Texas.
Clint is a regular. He is a regular.
Appreciate you. We got Simone from Canada. That's
Yes,
awesome.
welcome.
One of our regulars, Crystal Cox, absolutely, from Spokane, Washington.
Yes.
Love it. So,
Simone, what part of Canada are you in? We were just in Toronto about a little over a week ago. So you have to put exactly where in Canada you're watching from. Oh, okay. Simone is Simone, who I'm talking to right now. That's in Canada. Welcome. This is your first time. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We pray that this will be a true blessing to you. So we are thankful to have you. As we are just getting started, please share on your social media. Just share Mental Health Mondays on your platform. Say, hey, we're talking about family issues and we're taking your questions. And so please share on your social media, and we are going to do our very best to answer these questions. Again, we are not your mental health professionals, but we are giving
support and education. Exactly.
Yes, this is education for sure. Because I'm sure in your practice as well as you see patients, I know that I have found that a lot of people's issues that they're dealing with as adults originated with the family of origin. Not 100%, but there's just a lot. Yeah, there's things there that go on in our families that we just think is normal. You might be raised in a very anxious household, right? Or have a very anxious mom or dad. And so you just think that's normal. And then you're 30, 40 years old and you're like, wow, I'm such an anxious person. Where did this come from? You could link it back to possibly the anxious home that you grew up in. And your mom or dad just worried all the time. And so it kind of was the culture of the home. And then you're just realizing like, yeah, this is an issue for me and I don't want to have this anymore. And so that happens to so many of us, different things that we grew up with that we either thought was normal and maybe we didn't think it was normal, but it's just the way that it was and it's a part of us. And so we want to talk about some of those issues and taking your questions.
And sometimes it's cultural, as you said, and sometimes there's literally genetic contributions to things like, let's say, anxiety. Sometimes there's literally something that explains that.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I want to kick it off with a question to you, Sister Tante.
Okay.
You've raised, obviously with the support of Pastor, you've raised what, 5 children, right?
4. You just gave, well, if you want to include my grandbaby, which I'm not raising her, she's just our grandbaby, but yeah, 4 children. Yes.
You've helped to successfully bring 4 individuals to adulting. Like that's impressive. That's impressive.
Yes. The youngest is 17 and she'll be 18 in October. And I'm just like, saying that she's an adult because she's in college and she's almost 18. But yeah, so
Wow, she's 17. Okay.
she went early. She went early. She homeschooled the last part of her. Well, well, it's a long story, but she put she only had 4 classes for her senior year. And
Right.
when we moved across the country, she's like, I am not transferring to a whole nother school to get a whole nother friend group for just a year. So she's like, I will homeschool. She made this decision that she would homeschool the part of her last part of her junior and senior year. And she put all that together and she graduated early so that she could
That's
just go
brilliant.
straight into college. Yeah.
That's
And
brilliant.
we allowed her to do it because we're here as well, even though she lives in the dorm. But anyways.
So here's my question to you. Give me one tip that when you became aware of this, you used it in parenting. Like, give me, what's the one main thing that you're like, this has helped me over and over and over again?
I'm going to, as therapists, we learn how to let silence sometimes sit in the session just so they can process. And so I'm going to let some silence right here. I really want to get this one right and give you guys let's see. It has to be my number one thing that I've learned is to learn when to speak and when not to speak. Yes.
That's so profound.
When you want to speak, pray and ask God, is this the time to speak? And if most of the time it's not, it's just like speaking when the Holy Spirit, when God's telling you speak now, just refraining. Do you know how many times I've just like bite my tongue? Because, and now it's not even just bite your tongue, but don't send that text right now. Like you can't do that now. That it's not going to translate well. And so, yeah, just learning how to be quiet and silent and then pray. If I could show you my prayer journals, I wish I could just show you the covers of my prayer journals. So I'm silent verbally, but I'm talking to God instead. That's my whole parenting package.
So when you say your prayer journal, you mean like you write out your prayers?
Yes. Yes. And you know who first introduced me to prayer journaling was Janet Page. She was the conference president her husband was the conference president in Central California Conference where Ivor and I started, where he started. And so she was doing a pastor's wife retreat. And she just introduced it to us and how it transformed her prayer life and what the miracles that come from her prayer journals. And she was so inspirational that I was like, I have to do this. And so yeah, got it.
So what do you write? So like whatever you would have said, you
write.
Man.
That? Yeah, but I'm not like being so wordy. I'm not like, how sometimes we're talking to God and we're so wordy. So yeah, I mean, I always start with praise first. I just put it as yes, I have been asked this, but I put on the title or the beginning of it. It's always a praise. What did God do for me yesterday or the day before that I'm going to praise him for? So I started with praise and thanking him for what I'm thankful for. And then I go into, confession. It's really what we do during Power Wednesdays and our popcorn prayer. So confession and then intercession. What else I like about the prayer journaling is then after I'm doing my personal intercession, then I have a section for others. Because, people always say, please
I'll pray for you.
And then we say, yeah, we'll pray for you. But sometimes we don't get it right. So the others helps me stay accountable. So when I see the person next time, I can say, I've been praying for you. And it helps me, because I'll forget. Like we all do that. Yeah.
That's right. So pray for me, sis.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes, I can put you in the others, but
oh my goodness.
If I could just tell you them, I can't tell you all the miracles that have happened, but I could tell you miracles have happened in that prayer journal. Like I don't know. It's something like we can just pray. Of course we can pray, and people have prayer closets. People have their own unique, ways of doing it. I just feel it's right there on my nightstand. So when I wake up, it's the first thing that I see. Then I'm like, okay, I need to grab my journal and start praying. And I I don't know. For me, it just really, really works. And so
See?
learning how to be quiet, and I talk in that prayer journal though. Man, when I tell the kids, I was like, well, you might stop me from speaking on something right now because you don't want to listen, but you can't stop me from putting it in my prayer journal. And then they kind of roll their eyes, but they don't even know so many things have happened in their lives that are in that prayer journal. So positive things, positive things.
That's awesome. Amara
Oh,
says she prays for him right away so she doesn't forget. Yeah,
yeah, that's
that's
good.
my technique, Amara. It's just that it ends up being like a 10-second prayer.
Right, right.
But
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
So now, ladies and gentlemen that are listening, so I'm trying to give you time to ask your question.
yes.
And so that's why I pose that question. So please get your questions in the chat.
And
Yeah,
then back to you. What would be your main advice? I mean, you have one daughter, but you're a parent. A child is a child. So what would be you can only say one thing that
right,
you would tell people, and I'll give you some time to think. What you've learned.
right. First, I would want to commend you on what you chose because that's just so pivotal.
Mm.
And I think I've used that more in marriage, though. Like, don't say the
Mm.
first, the second, or
Yeah.
the third thing that
Yeah.
comes to mind, or the
Yes.
fourth, or the fifth.
Yes.
Okay. Like, it's like we got to go through like six and get down to seventh. All right. At the eighth, okay,
Yeah.
now you might start to think about it. And don't even do that one. Go to the ninth,
Right. No,
you know,
and that's
or
incredible
that,
advice. That's
yeah.
incredible advice. And I can tell you that I do better with my kids than I do with my husband. I probably I might not say the first, I might not say the second, but the third, maybe.
That's coming in there. That's coming in.
I don't
That's
know if I
coming
get
in.
down to the seventh. So
That's coming in.
I need to put that in
Well,
my prayer journal. Okay. I'm convicted to put that in my prayer journal.
absolutely.
That I can
Absolutely.
get down to the seventh thing and then not say anything.
Yeah. My okay. So it's the funniest thing when you become a parent, right? Because by this point now you have a perspective. Like
Mhm.
you've gone that way before.
Mhm.
So now you have all these preconceived, oh, don't do that. Oh, don't do it like that. Oh, I know what happens if you do that. And you have all this loaded life experience.
Right.
And you want to superimpose it on your child, right?
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
want to share it with them. You want them, and
Mm.
God bless them. God bless them. To some degree, they listen, right? But but
Mm.
but
Mhm.
the thing that like just gave me some peace was a phrase that I say to my daughter all the time. It's your turn at bat.
Yes.
Your
I
turn.
love that. I love that.
It's your turn. We as parents, we almost want to be like, no, no, let me take that swing for you. No,
Exactly. That's the hardest thing for us to step out of the batting box and let
it's
them take a swing.
like
Excuse me.
even God
Mhm.
respects free will. Even
Mhm.
God, in fact, He died for our free will.
Yes.
He
Yes.
died for it. Like that's how sacred free will is.
Mm.
So, however much you want to make the decision for them, you cannot.
You can't.
It's their turn at bat. And what's interesting is you really get the God experience. You
Yes.
really get the God experience because not
Because
only did you
he's up in heaven while we're like down here making our own decisions. And he sends his comforter, the Holy Spirit, to try to like move on our hearts, but we still get to make our own decisions.
he sent his comforter, he's
Mhm.
provided scripture and advice.
Yes.
He's told us go this way and we go this way. And
Mhm.
he has prepared a plan even for you going that way. Like he's still committed. He's still
Yes.
committed. So you
Yes.
really get to see the view because you're like, here I gotta be ready, help you out.
Yes.
So it's the reminder, it's their turn at bat.
Mm.
So it's their
That's
turn
great
at bat,
advice. That's great
and
advice.
it's their turn, and you really want to cultivate influence.
Mhm.
You really want to cultivate
Mhm.
influence so that they will want you as a batting coach.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
you you don't have force now. You want that they've seen your wisdom, they've seen you live your values, so that they'll say, okay, I'm not going to have you swing for me, but I'll listen. Let
Yes.
me hear your thoughts. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's my advice. That's my advice.
Yes. You're gonna make me. If I had to choose a second, the first is
Yeah.
what I said, but the
Right.
second would be to learn to apologize to your children.
Oh
Learn
yes.
to apologize to your children.
Oh
Humble.
yes.
Humility, basically humility goes a
My daughter has
long
straight
way.
up said to me, "It means a lot to me that you apologize. It means a lot."
Yes,
That is so true. It's
yes.
humbling. It's humbling because you
Mhm.
want to look like you want to act like you're perfect. You
Yes,
know
and
you ain't perfect.
look like you don't make mistakes. We make mistakes.
Exactly. We
Yeah,
make mis
we make
that well
mistakes.
said. Well
Yeah.
said. We can end the program right there. That was straight gold for you.
Those 2
All
things.
right.
Well,
We
let's
got
see,
our
we have
first question.
yeah.
Hi, Pauline, Shomo Gooding. Thank you so much for this question. So here we go. What are the signs that a person is a narcissist, and can children display narcissism? You know what's funny? When you think of all the personality disorders, like when you're coming out the womb, don't you have all of them?
Right,
Like
right?
who can you think of but yourself when you're a little kid? So
Mhm.
that's an interesting question. All right. So let's take it seriously. What are signs that a
Okay.
person is a narcissist? So we could run down formally. A
Mhm.
narcissist is a personality disorder. Okay, it's a personality disorder, and
Right.
what that means is you're going to see these characteristics pervasively, meaning you're going to see it
Right.
throughout their life in several areas of their life. So they're very pervasive traits. In the case of a narcissist, there's some like very specific things. There's some very specific things that I could, bring up to discuss narcissism. In fact,
Mhm.
like I did something on narcissism. So let me see if I can't pull it up real quick.
And I thought we didn't cover it. I guess we
Yeah, I
covered
thought we covered it. I thought we covered narcissism. So I want to see if I can
I
find
know
my.
we've done depression, anxiety, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
I know we did. So let me see if I can pull it up because that would be helpful. Yeah, narcissism 101. I thought I did. All
Mhm.
right, let's see what we got. Narcissism 101. Let's see.
And as you're pulling that up, I just want to answer Antoni's, I believe Antony, I hope I'm saying that right, question. Um, Mental Health Mondays does not have their own YouTube channel, but we are live every week on Power of the Lamb YouTube and Living Man Online Church's YouTube. So hopefully that helps. I don't know where you're watching from now. I don't know if you're
Okay.
on. Okay, you're on Facebook, Antony. So, yeah, right now we're also live on YouTube through Living Man Church and Power of the Lamb Ministries. Go ahead.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So yeah. So basically, first we have to talk about, hey, what is a narcissist? And so let me share that with you. So it's this pervasive pattern of being grandiose or having
Mhm.
fantasy. It's this need for admiration. And I
Mhm.
knew there was a hallmark symptom that you want to be aware of, and it's a lack of empathy.
I was just
It's
gonna say that lack of
Were you
empathy.
gonna say that? Because
Yeah, I was gonna say
that's
that.
one of the hallmark,
Yeah.
symptoms.
Mhm.
But this lack of empathy, just this inability to really get into a person's experience and kind of view things from your perspective. That's a real struggle for a narcissist. And you asked, hey, can children, experience narcissism? Well, if you look at the book definition, it says it more arises in early adulthood. Okay,
Mhm.
you don't typically think of children because a lot of times what you'll see, children tend to be self-oriented. They tend to really kind of focus on
Yes.
their own needs. But
Right.
part of that is it's not a personality disorder. Part of it is brain development.
Right. Right.
There are stages of brain development, and at some point you become equipped with the ability to have this skill to kind of see the world from a different person's perspective. That's part of maturity, actually. So yeah. So they're
Mhm.
like five or more of the following. You have a grandiose sense of self-importance. You're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, brilliance, beauty, ideal love. They believe that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people. They require excessive admiration. They have a sense of entitlement, unreasonable expectations, especially favorable treatment. They think they're entitled to favorable treatment, um, or or they expect you to be automatically compliant with their expectations. They can be interpersonally exploitive. So, in other words, they can, kind of take advantage of people. And again, lack empathy. They're often
Right.
envious of others or believe that others are envious of them, or they show arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. So you must understand that there's whole books that have been written on this.
Right.
But one of the hallmark things is that lack of empathy, and then that feeling of just grandiosity. They just feel like they're so great, and they're very ready to exploit people to their own benefit. So those are just some of the features. So I hope that was helpful. And typically it's early adulthood. What were you going to say,
Right.
Sam?
I was going to say, and they also have a fixation on their appearance. And I know we all like to look nice for the most part, but they take it to a whole nother level. It's almost like their self-worth is defined by their appearance, and how the world looks at them. And that goes along with the praise that they want. That's on a whole nother level as well. Also, narcissists are probably, I don't know if you find this, but can be some of the difficult, one of the most difficult, I feel like, personality disorders to give therapy to, because it's very challenging to for the narcissist to accept either the recommendations or what the therapist is saying or what they're seeing. It's hard for them to view what the mental health professional is trying to get through to them.
Right, right. Well, with the personality disorders, like if you're gonna be successful, it's more than likely gonna be very specific strategies to that personality disorder. So so you'll hear people say, "Hey man, there isn't a lot of hope with personality disorders." That's not it. It's just
Right.
the treatment has to be really tailored to their
Mhm.
issues.
Right.
Um, and 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 that's just the prerequisite. And part of my issue is because you're dealing with the brain is neuroplastic, so it's a silly thing to say that that brain is not capable of change.
Yes,
Like
the brain is always capable of changing no
it's
matter.
neuroplastic.
Right.
If I can
Right.
acquire a skill, I can have significant changes in how I view the world. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because the brain is neuroplastic, but it's just what are the experiences and the drills and the interventions that will lead to the changes. That's the
Mhm.
question, and it's really taking the time to figure out what those things can be. So she asked, can children display narcissistic traits? Well, can a child have trouble displaying empathy? Can a child be grandiose and think that they're the greatest thing ever? Can a child be somewhat exploitive? The answer is, those kind of traits and those issues, of course, they can be shown. But one of the things you want to be aware of anytime you're talking about a psychiatric disorder is there is a prerequisite to get the diagnosis that you
Mhm.
have, let's say, narcissism. And
Right.
that's a far cry from you showing one trait. A
Mhm.
psychiatric diagnosis starts with eliminating a medical reason for what's happening. First, you do that. Then you fall into the realm of psychiatry, and then you very carefully apply a set of criteria and see if the behavior matches that diagnosis. So it's a very
Mhm.
careful process as opposed to you seeing one trait and saying, well, the person has this disorder. So great question.
Right. We have another question, which I think I think we can quickly answer this, because when we mentioned what's our advice, I think this will answer that. But what do you find the hardest about parenting? So for me personally, and then Dr. White can answer as well, is I said that the biggest thing I had to learn is like when to be quiet and not say anything. I would say that is very difficult. And then just letting go and letting them, as Dr. White said, go like swing for themselves. They are in the batting box by themselves, swinging on their own. I think letting go and letting them do that is probably, for me, was the
Yeah.
hardest and sometimes is hardest thing of parenting. Go ahead.
I'll drill it down to this. The hardest thing is to watch them make mistakes.
Well, that as soon as I finished, I said I should have said that one, but there you go. That one.
That's the
There you
hardest.
go.
It's like you see it coming.
Because then you
And,
hurt with them. Like if they hurt, you're hurting.
well, you've got to help them pick up the pieces.
Right.
It's not like it's like you got to be right. You see it coming.
Mercy.
And you're trying to talk to them, and they literally see you as the enemy, potentially.
Ugh.
And you see it coming, and you're just like, oh my goodness. And guess what? You don't get to say I told you so.
No. Just
You don't even get to say I
throw
told
that
you.
out of your mind.
That is not the time to say I told you so, even though you did. That's
Right.
the hardest. I think that's probably one of the hardest things. Like, it just rends a parent's heart to see their kid making the mistake, and you just don't even feel like there's anything you can do. Now, praise the Lord, my daughter has spared me, a lot of that, but you just want great things for them. It's like they think we don't want them to have fun. We want you to have
I
fun.
want them to
But
have fun.
but we know that
Good fun.
long-lasting fun
Safe
is,
fun.
yeah. Well, but awesome fun. It comes from good decisions. It comes from good decisions, and sometimes good decisions is denying some fun up front so that you can
Right.
have even more fun long
Later
term.
on. Exactly.
So, all right. I've often heard that silence means consent.
Mm.
Whoa, where did you hear that, Deborah?
Oh.
And so, first of all, hello, Deborah. I've often heard that silence means consent. Is that true when it comes to a relationship? And how can you make a person express what they really feel when you've offended them when they are silent? Okay. You want to take this first, sis, or you want?
Well, it went like a different way at the end, but okay. Often heard that silence means consent. Is that true? So silence doesn't mean consent. It kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I don't know if you're talking about in a marital relationship or with children. But definitely if you're talking about parenting, silence doesn't mean consent. It just means you're being wise. And if you're listening to the Holy Spirit, that's why you're being silent. Like I was talking about earlier, biting your tongue, you're just knowing that this is not the right time for you to say this, that what you're about to say is not going to help the situation. And it would just benefit you. You would get further in the situation and relationship with your child and even spouse to be quiet. So, I mean, going back to what Dr. White says, don't say the first thing, second, third, fourth thing, even wait, go all the way down to maybe the seventh thing and maybe don't even say that. And it doesn't mean that you're okay with whatever is going on, but you want to have wisdom. And so when you speak it, you want your spouse to be able to receive it. And you just don't want to speak just so that you can say, I'm going into spousehood, but even for children too.
Yeah.
It could be for both. You really want your family member to hear what you're saying and to receive it, and not just so you can say, oh, well, I told you, I said it. And so that's not getting you anywhere. That's not getting you anywhere in the situation.
Well said. Well said. Let's deal with this whole silence meaning consent. Now, in a societal sense, you might have heard, for example, Martin Luther King talk about when society is bad, it's not just the result of bad people acting bad. Sometimes it's the result of good people being silent. So, in that sense, sometimes people are silent because they're afraid. They know what the right thing is to say, but they're afraid of the consequences of saying the right thing. And it's in that sense that sometimes you're silent can make it like you're consenting to what's wrong. But that's not the context of what we're talking about here. We're talking about leveraging silence to learn what the appropriate response is going to be. One of the reasons that we will listen to you while you're speaking is because you're informing me of your language. Because
Mm,
there's more languages than just English, French, Latin, so on and so forth. There's a way you like to be spoken to.
right.
There's a tone of voice that you want to be spoken to. So when I'm a therapist and I'm listening to you, like you'll see the movies making fun of us, like where we're just sitting there, just kind of, no, it's not that. It's the listening has a purpose. The listening is informing me of what the response needs to be that's going to be therapeutic to you. So as you can see, that listening has nothing to do with consent per se. And in that context, it's everything to do with getting from you
Mm-hmm.
what I need to understand that will best impact you. One
Right.
of one of the tools that I use regularly, and I've been using this with my daughter a lot, is what are you hearing me say?
Mm,
What are you hearing me say? And the flip, here's what I'm hearing you say.
right.
Here's what I'm hearing you say. And so 9 out of 10 times when you ask that question, the person is
Mm-hmm.
not hearing you. They're
Right.
not hearing everything you're saying.
Right.
So yeah, so silence has a very, very important purpose, and it certainly is not to say that you concede. And how can you make a person express what they really feel when you have offended them? Now, by definition, when you offend someone, um, they feel like you may have betrayed their trust. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they feel like when you wound a person, um, like they feel like, okay, well now I got to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
Harming me certainly doesn't make me feel like opening myself up for some more abuse.
Right.
Um,
They don't feel safe to speak.
right. But I've noticed an interesting thing in my patients. I've noticed something, and I've noticed that this works really well to get people talking who are not talking.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I noticed is when people are not talking, could it be that they're saying, if you read the situation, I've said everything I need to?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps they're not speaking because their behavior is screaming at you.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe that they're like, I don't need words. If you listen to the situation, you'll see I'm saying everything that I need to. And so, with that, what I'll do is, I'll say to the person, I could see why you're not saying anything, and I'll share what I've picked up. So, here
Mm-hmm.
you've gone through this. Things have been incredibly difficult. You've
Mm-hmm.
said it 1,000 times, and nobody's responded to you.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah, I'm sick of talking. And they start
Right.
talking. you know?
Right.
you know? But you make it clear, I hear you. What were you gonna say, sis?
Well, no, I totally agree with you. And I was just kind of trying to track and follow this question. Um, so I mean, they've offended a family member, or I guess the spouse, okay, relationship, and they're silent. Um, so how can you make them? I think that part, how can you make them? That's where you need to take that part right there. We can't make someone do anything. You can be humble. You can show humility. You can apologize. You
And
can
you can
pray.
take responsibility.
And yet take
And
responsibility.
and by
Like
and by the way,
be a
you said
sincere apology. Go
apologize.
ahead.
You said apologize, but we should unpack apologizing. This is not one of
Yeah.
those if I offended you.
Oh, don't, that's not an apology. If I offended you, obviously the person is offended. Like, don't apologize from a place that's not coming from empathy, like from empathy for the other person, that you're feeling their hurt and pain that you hurt them. Because anything less than that is just not a real
It's a
apology.
second wound. It's a
Right.
second wound. So you're
Right.
driving them even further away.
Right.
So it's getting into their experience. Honey, I've done it again.
Mm-hmm.
I've hurt you again. How
Mm-hmm.
could I? Here you were doing this, you were saying this, you were open to me, and I wounded you.
Right.
How I don't, I mean, I understand why you're having trouble forgiving me. Like that's the
Mhm.
language. I understand why you're having trouble forgiving me. I'll be honest, I don't deserve your forgiveness.
Right. I
Like
feel horrible that I hurt you.
I feel horrible. I
Mhm.
really feel horrible. And I see how much I've hurt you. Okay.
Mhm.
That's the language that makes a person say, well, maybe you've heard me, maybe you're hearing me. And here's the most important part. Here's why I will never do it again.
Right. I've
Here's
learned.
why.
I've
Th-
learned.
These are the steps I'm putting in place so I
Mhm.
never do that again.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's what people want to hear in their apology.
And
What were
you
you
can well, I was gonna say, yes, I agree, and you can see when you come at a person the way that you just described, you can see, their anger or whatever they're feeling melting when you speak that way. When I say melting, it's just like they're in a space where they're once you approach them that way, they put their guards down, and they're just feeling like, okay, I can accept this apology. And it doesn't mean like there's still not upset feelings, but it's the beginning. It's the beginning.
you start moving towards one another. Like
Mhm,
when you take serious, meaningful responsibility, you
mhm.
start moving towards one another. And this is presuming you've not wounded the person over and over and over and over again, because at
Right,
some point your words start meaning nothing to them.
right. And
Um,
what we're sharing here, I mean, this could be between two spouses, this can be between children, any family member, really. I mean, that true apology needs to happen between any person really that you've offended, but we're talking about family today. So, just apologizing. It doesn't matter if it's your spouse, if it's your parent, if it's your child, if it's your aunt, your uncle, or any extended family. It's a true apology. And the things that I was, I said, shared this, I was just sharing this the other day, that the things I share in marriage therapy with couples, it really can be applied to any
I think,
relationship, because we're talking about, the way we
uh,
communicate, the way we talk to each other, forgiveness, all types, those types of things. It's like the way we handle our relationships, it really is a big part of our lives. And if we're going to have happy, healthy relationships, those principles can be applied to any relationship.
Amara, we're going to come back to this question. We're going to come back to this question, but I want to show you this one real quick, because this is such of a, at least when you see where I go with this. In the Bible, in regards to the kings of Israel, you have good kings, and then their sons become bad kings. Then the
Mhm.
bad kings become, she said, great kings. What make children become so very different? That's a good question. That's a good
Mhm.
question. But I think it allows us to talk about a really important feature of parenting, a really important feature. And Amra, we're going to come back to your question. Um, I worked in addictions, right? And sometimes I worked with adolescents, right?
Mhm.
And there was something that I noticed. It didn't matter if the parent was a judge, a politician, a neurosurgeon, a obstetrician, an attorney. It didn't, a priest, a pastor. It doesn't matter what your profession is.
Mhm.
All that matters is that you're not present
Right.
and you're putting your kids at risk.
Mm. Yes.
It doesn't matter what you're. And
Mhm.
so in this question, it said they were a good king. Being a good king doesn't
Mhm.
mean you were a good father. It
Right.
doesn't it doesn't mean you were present. Just because you
True.
could run the land
Right.
excellently,
Right.
you
Yeah.
could be a
Right.
phenomenal. But if you're not present to teach that child discipline, if you're not present to teach that child, that's not how you speak to people. If you're not
Mhm.
present to say, you know what, your word is your bond, and nurture them and teach them
Mhm.
that and spend time with them and love them and embrace them and take the time to understand what is their language, what
Mhm.
speaks to them. Some
Mhm.
children, you look at them and that's all the discipline you need. And
Mhm.
other children, you've got to study to understand what is it that gets this child's attention. That
Yeah.
takes time. That
Right.
takes emotional investment.
Each child is different. You had mentioned before that we have 4 children, and all 4 of them are completely different, and we have to deal with them in 4 different ways. And now 2 are, well, they're 3 are adults technically, and 1 is almost, so we almost have 4 adult children, but still dealing and talking with them and dealing with issues. We have to approach them all differently because they
You have to
process
calibrate.
differently.
Because what?
Because they process situations and things differently.
Absolutely. And so that's why you can have a person be a great king, that means great in their career, but they didn't teach the children how to be adults. They didn't teach them how to be kings. And so now you see that just show up and it cause all kind of problems. So I think that question allows us to really, kind of deal with that issue. But now we can go back to Amra's question,
And
because
what was
then
Amber's question? I didn't see
she
that.
talked about PTSD. There we go. Let's go there, because I mean this is deep. So many people are holding on to past traumas with their parents. Amra, oh, what a great one.
Be it verbal.
Be it verbal, physical, emotional abuse, etc. Would you suggest discussing it with them as adults to help the healing and forgiveness process? Come on now, Amra. That's powerful.
Yeah, it is.
You're first at bat with that one.
Well, I was just going to say, I do believe in speaking to your parents as adults, but I definitely would encourage to do that with a mental health professional that works with families and these relationship issues. Just because they can help you go through this process that's going to be very delicate, very difficult, and it can help you take the communication steps in a way that's going to actually help the situation and not cause more injury to the situation.
Powerful.
Yeah,
Powerful.
that would be
So,
my advice, but go ahead.
thank you for that, sis. And I hope you heard that counsel, that clarity is power. So that if you can get that mental health practitioner and have them help you get some clarity, that can be incredibly helpful. Here's my take on this. Point number 1. There's a point at which, where you become an adult, it's time to divorce yourself from just being connected to the past and using that as your excuse for, hey, why I'm not moving on to X, moving on to Y. Like, there's a point at which it's like, you know what? I cannot cut off my nose to spite my face. I cannot allow the damage of the past limit my future. I do have to move forward. The other thing I would just say is, sometimes when it's possible, a reconciliation with a parent can be amazing, can be absolutely amazing healing. But guess what? Sometimes it's not viable. Sometimes it's not viable. Sometimes that person has passed on. Sometimes they're not even in the mental state. But I know for myself, I was not going to let that reconciling with this person, which is outside of my purview. Like, I can't control that per se. I cannot let that determine how my life was going to go forward.
Right.
What I did in my situation was, the parenting that I wanted, I gave that to my child. That's what I did.
Amen.
That's what I did. The father that I wanted to show up for me, I showed up that way for my child.
And that right there is, wow. You couldn't have chosen a better, healthier way to approach parenting after you had experienced a trauma in your own childhood. So I applaud you. I applaud you for that. And so many people don't handle it in that way. You're familiar with Bohemian therapy that goes down from like 3 generations, and they're looking for patterns from the father, the grandfather. Like, you go, when you're working with a client, you're looking at 3 generations. So you're looking for um, drug abuse. You're looking for, all different types of things that could be a pattern. And so the point is that so many times that people will become that, like, similar to that parent or that caused the trauma, instead of making a decision like you did to say, okay, nope, it stops right here with me and I'm going to
Absolutely.
be that person. And so that is what needs to happen. But so often it doesn't. And that
And
causes so much family conflict when it doesn't
it
happen.
was very healing. That's what I want you to know. It was
Yeah.
very healing. It was
Yeah.
very healing. I controlled what I could control,
Yes.
and I could control how I was going to show up as a parent, and it was very healing. So I do want to
Yes.
say that. All
Yeah.
right, my homegirl Crystal Cox has a question. If someone is diagnosed as bipolar, how do you get them to realize they need help without making them feel like they're crazy? Crystal, my goodness, great question. All right, if someone's diagnosed with bipolar, how do you get them to realize they need help without making them feel like they are crazy? So I think it's worth taking a second to talk about what bipolar disorder is.
Right.
So the word bi, especially if you have any Latin roots, you would know bi is two, and polar obviously is poles. So we're talking about two poles.
Right.
So one pole is depression. Well, I'm putting it up like this. One pole would be mania. Mania is up, and then the other pole is, of course, depression. So with mania is this unique situation where a person has a reduced need for sleep. And when I say reduced need for sleep, in the case of acute mania, it could be like
up to 7 days. It had to be officially.
Well, it's like yeah, beyond 7 days of
Yeah.
like 1 to 2 hours of sleep. Okay. And in
Or
that
or no sleep, or no sleep.
With a massive shift in their typical persona. So they might be hyperverbal, they might be super agitated, they might be engaging in high risk behaviors. And by high risk, we're talking about hypersexual, maybe gambling, maybe buying a lot of things that they can't afford.
Yeah, taking risks.
So it's really it's really off the charts. It's pretty severe.
And some people who are in a manic state that are like business people or even in school, they get like some of their best work done because they're in that. And I don't want to say best, like this is a good thing, but because they'll just run off of no sleep and they'll just be very focused and they just,
that's more hypomania.
Yeah,
because see, with hypomania, it's a little easier to funnel the energy into productivity. With mania, it's harder for you to actually be productive. Like you might be starting a bunch of things, but you're not really finishing them. With hypomania, that's where you can be more like, it can be a bit more productive.
Right.
So with mania, you're definitely going to see some negative consequences. You're going to see like pretty profound disorder.
Right.
Now, here's the complicated thing with mania. Here's the complicated thing. It feels good.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Like there's a point at which it feels good. There's a point at which the energy is going so much, it's actually exhausting to the point of being painful. But I'm saying there's a point at which the mania actually feels good. I once had one of my bipolar patients say to me, the patient said, a drug addict has to use drugs to get high. For me, all I have to do is stop taking my medications.
Yes.
I was like, wow. In order to become manic. So Crystal, you're talking about a very complicated condition. And again, anytime I talk about a psychiatric disorder, it really starts with a medical evaluation that's ruling out potential confounding factors like hyperthyroidism, for example.
Right. And I was going to say that too, because the question was, and the question's not up there anymore, but the question was, how do you make somebody, go get therapy that has bipolar? Well, how do we know for sure, listening to all these diagnostic criteria that they really do have bipolar? Because things like bipolar, even narcissism, we throw these around so easily, but really only a mental health professional can diagnose disorders.
So generally speaking, what brings people to treatment can often be some of the negative consequences that they experience from the issues. So sometimes a manic episode, a person can land themselves in jail. Sometimes they can end up in a hospital. And so a lot of times, sometimes it's actually kind of, hey, do you think there's something wrong? Do you think
Right.
everything is okay? What are your thoughts? Um, I know you have big dreams for yourself. Is that working out for you? And then, hey, what if we just talk to someone? What if we just get the evaluation to see what exactly is going on? So, Crystal, let me make no bones about it. It can be a challenge. It can be
Mhm.
incredibly difficult. And sometimes you actually need to involve law enforcement to get people into treatment, or to get them to where they can actually be evaluated. So I mean, that is the truth. Because again, sometimes with the disorder, the person will not have the insight that they need the help. That's, hey,
Mhm.
I don't know any other way to say it. So
Mhm.
sometimes you will need to call 911 in order to get help.
Right.
But you're talking about a very complicated disorder that really needs mental health support.
Mhm.
So it's no simple task.
Right.
Okay, so Lee,
Brother Leon saying my mom had me at 17, so she was kind of naive. So I don't discuss the trauma I experienced with my stepdad. How should I handle that?
well, this first of all, this one starts with that prayer that you talked about. Leon, we would definitely want to add you to that prayer list. Sorry to hear about the trauma that
Right.
you have experienced. Um, well, it would start with, I would think, getting some help. It would definitely start with
Mhm.
getting some mental health support. Part of what mental health support
For for himself. I mean,
for
dealing with
himself,
that trauma.
for
Yeah.
himself, for
Mhm.
himself, because
Mhm.
part of what trauma does is it leaves you with questions.
Yes.
It leaves you, trauma is very bewildering. It's like, what is happening? Why is it happening? What's going on? How should I feel about this? Is this my fault? It leaves you with so many questions,
Mhm.
so that it can be so important to have someone help you answer those questions,
Mhm.
because it can be dangerous to come to the wrong conclusions. Some people who've been traumatized come to the conclusion that it was their fault, you know?
Right. Right.
And from that place, sometimes that can lead you down some very unfortunate spaces.
Right.
So Leon, the goal would be to really, you've got a lot of questions. The goal would be, hey, what setting can I place myself in to get good answers to these questions? And they're good answers because they help you to build. They
Right.
help you to move forward with your life. Okay. Um, Healing is a process, so it doesn't occur in an instant per se.
Mhm.
But you can grow, and it is really important to put yourself in the space where you can get accurate, intelligent, truth-based answers to the questions that let you build your recovery. Let
Right.
you build your recovery. And
Mhm.
here's the goal: learn how to change, and learn how to funnel that pain. Learn how to use the energy of that pain to build beautiful things, to
Mhm.
build a productive life. That's the ultimate goal: to
Right.
learn how to take that pain to build beautiful things. I took the pain of my childhood and
Mhm.
I built the best relationship I could with my child, the best relationship I knew how. That was very healing.
Mhm. Mhm.
To put myself in a position to help parents and to help people with mental health issues, to maybe avoid some of the pain I experienced. That was very healing to me. What were you going to say,
Mhm.
sis?
I was just going to say, I agree with everything that you just shared. And, I've worked with clients before with childhood trauma issues. And they, began that process of working through it and got to a point where they uh, felt, mended or healed enough. And then that it turned into family therapy. So they were wanting to invite those parents or family members in for a few sessions to go that next step and say, okay, I'm healed enough that I feel like I can address you, or at least share what my experience was or what I went through. And that was also a part of their healing. So Brother Leon, definitely start with with yourself in dealing with the trauma, as Dr. White has said. And then if you're wanting to take that next step, and feel that it would be in your, that if you feel like it would be a part of, it would do you well to also take this healing process and talk to your mom or another family member into that process. I mean, that could be something that you and your mental health professional can do together as well.
Well said, sis. Now, Gina Brower, and then we're going to go to Crystal Cox because she had a great question. Gina said, I have a friend in my neighborhood who's constantly being called names, blamed, and shamed for everything and anything. How can I help? So, so some more context would be helpful in this situation. But that said, most environments have systems in place that offer support and protection. What I mean by that is there's usually an authority figure, and some appeal to the authority figure, and the systems in place would seem like the route that you want to go. But again, Gina, this is sometimes where it would be worth getting a counselor, because that you can actually explain the nuances and the details of the situation. Because is it law enforcement you need? Is it the authorities? How should they be approached? What's the route of doing that? What's the support that person might need in order for them to be able to champion themselves or defend themselves? Is it their parents? So there are a lot of factors, but the idea just being, I think, yeah, it's worth investigating and figuring out how can you attach this person to a source of power that can help them get the justice that they need, or empower themselves to set the boundaries that they need to in order to have that stop. Crystal asked this real quick question, so we'll come right back.
Okay.
Yeah, check this out. What do you do if the only way someone thinks they can communicate is by yelling to get their point across? I think that's a really important point to address. What do you do if the only way someone thinks they can communicate is by yelling to get their point across?
Again, Crystal, or go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, again, you're not, I don't know if you're talking, if someone's in a marriage or in a spousal relationship with this person who is yelling, or if it's just, another family member. But you can set your own boundaries. No one can lay down the boundaries for what you are going to participate in or be involved in, or even allow to happen to you when it comes to situations like this. I mean, so you can be very transparent in a kind, respectful way, even though that's not what they're being to you, but in a kind, respectful way, be transparent and let them know that you are not going to be in a space where you're being yelled at, or this is how they want to communicate. If they want to speak to you or talk to you, they're going to have to come in a respectful way where they're not yelling or screaming. And
yeah, I mean,
and you could also remove yourself from situations where that's the case.
Right. And again, this is why we qualify everything with, we're not your mental health experts, because it's like we would really need to know the nuances to provide you good counsel. But all we can do is let the questions inspire principles. And one of the principles, Crystal, is when you set boundaries, right? Like, let's say I say, I don't want a person to touch me. Then the boundary I need to set is that they're not within range of touching me. And what I want to talk about here is, like, if I don't want things to get to physical violence, then I need to set boundaries at verbal violence. Okay. So because if we never get to verbal violence, it's highly likely we won't then get to physical violence. Not
Right.
that it's impossible, because you get people that are, can be, not fully present. But the idea just being, no, we're gonna speak rationally because we're gonna keep things rational. And whether that's the only way you can communicate or not, I can't
Mhm.
focus. I
Mhm.
can't function. I can't think. I can't respond to you if you're yelling at me.
Mhm.
Um, so if you value me, you'll make the adjustment. If you
Mhm.
value me, you'll make the adjustment. Because I don't want to be triggered. Um,
Right.
I don't want to be triggered. I want to respond to you with respect, and
Mhm.
and you not yelling at me is going to make that more possible. So the idea just being, so this just allows us to talk about boundary setting.
Right.
If you're setting a boundary where you don't want things to get violent, let's say, then you want, hey, let me set the boundary at verbal violence. I don't want us being violent verbally. I
Right.
don't want us getting to where feel like we need to yell at each other, because violence is not useful. Violence is
Mhm.
not useful, and so we're not even going to get it to that point.
Mhm.
All right.
Yes. And this will be, let me
Um,
say two things. This will be our last question because we started a little late, but we're definitely a little bit over an hour. But I'm doing an audible and I'm kind of making a decision here for the both of us. But I
oh,
think you'll
yeah,
agree. I think you'll agree with it though. That's why I'm
I'm
making
with
it.
you. I'm with you. You
Um,
definitely make
that
decisions for us.
Well, yeah, well, this is going to be a series. Like, there's so many good questions that we can keep going, and family is really, that's the foundation of where a lot of our issues come from. And so we want to take our time. If we're not getting to your questions, please come back next week. Um, share this link on your social media and bring your question next week because we will do our very best to answer it and come early. It's like they warm up. It takes time for them to warm up, and then all the questions flood in, and by that time we're out of time. But we're going to be here again, so come back next week with your questions. But let's take Pauline's last question. Why do so many Christian women believe that God wants them to stay in an abusive marriage? How is God being glorified? First of all, this is something that we're not your mental health professionals, and somebody in an abusive, emotionally and physical relationship. Okay, let me take that back. In a physical relationship, abusive relationship that someone is in, there are some different variety of ways for them to find safety. And that's definitely the main primary goal is that they are in a safe situation. But then sometimes, and sometimes, um, when women leave without a plan, without a safety plan, they can put themselves in
It can be dangerous.
even more dangerous. And so there definitely needs to be a safety plan. And, if this person is working with a mental health professional, they can help them with that. And that's so very important. And God does not want us to stay in abusive relationships. He,
I would say it like this, sis. I would
Mhm.
say it like this. Um, God came that we would have life and
Yes,
have it more abundantly.
right.
God is extremely pro-life. He's
Yes,
extremely pro-life. He values life. He values our safety, and he wants us to make decisions that are congruent with
right.
optimizing safety. That's the God that I know. And
Don't
that's
want
the
to
God.
put,
Yeah,
you
God,
don't
God,
want to put
God
the
does
person
not.
in more risk.
Right. That's how I would view that. So
Yes.
I see some other great questions. So you guys
There's
got to
great
make sure
questions.
you got to
There's
make sure you come back so that you can
Please.
ask those questions,
Please.
because we love the opportunity to share some principles we think would be helpful to you.
Yes. Yes. So time goes by fast when you're talking mental health and having fun on Mental Health Mondays, as we do here each and every week. We invite you back next week. Please bring your questions. Please come again. Bring your questions if they were not answered, so we can start right off the bat with these questions, because we really want to get as many answered as we can. And definitely share this link and talk about it with your friends and family, and say, hey, they're talking real talk, real mental health talk on Mental Health Mondays.
Absolutely.
And we'd love to have you come back, and so that we can also answer your questions. And so with that said, we hope that you have a very good rest of your Monday evening. Or maybe I didn't see anybody watching internationally, but I'm sure there is, and the replays will be there. But if you're already in Tuesday, have a good rest of your day. And we will see you next week.
Till
God
next
bless
time.
you.
Always a pleasure, sis.
Yes. Thank you for being here. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.